welcome back to Chad and Steve Have a Podcast. I bet you forgot about us, didn't you? It's been a while, hasn't it, Chad? I feel the last podcast we recorded was in February, and here it is December. So, well, what is that, 10 months?
It is, and I think we only had one episode before that for all of the years. So this is our year in review podcast where we're going to go through the 2 episodes that we released in 2024. This is the third episode, this year. So.
Well, this has been a year of change. Lots of changes have been happening this year, and I think that goes for both of us, which is probably some of the reason why you and I haven't been recording podcasts, is just because so much has been happening. And one of those things that has been happening was, for me, I bought this condo here in San Francisco. So it's like a separate place where I can focus on making art. And I've got a studio space in here where I can do things like this, record podcasts. And so this has been for the past few months now. And I just love the space, and I love that I feel very inspired when I'm making artwork here. And we'll get into all of that too.
It's interesting to think that we're going to be addressing our resolutions, and one very specific resolution from you from the last time that we did this was to be able to provide yourself a space to be creative. And you literally and figuratively did that, Steve. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking at the resolutions we made at the beginning of the year, and one of mine was focus on art, more on art, less on craft. And so I can honestly say that my life has been consumed with art this year that I wasn't really expecting. I was starting out the year thinking, well, if I just have one day a week, set that aside to focus on doing some sort of art. I didn't know what that was going to be at the time. And then it led into, eventually in March, I started doing these wood burnings, and I kind of fell in love with it. And now that is like my main focus, is making the artwork and trying to justify the fact that I haven't been doing hardly anything with YouTube.
And that aligns perfectly with, I think, what your first resolution of last year was. I wrote it down. Steve was looking for a creative release and was hoping to find something outside of woodworking that would allow him space to be creative in a different way. And I think you have really accomplished that quite well. That is a huge check mark. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we did. We spent a lot of that episode, or a lot of the time, like when we were speaking just in general, in and around that time, talking a lot about like, what is art, and what is it to be an artist? And do you do art as a living, or does that get in the way of like when you're trying to monetize it? And I remember us being really steadfast in not maybe feeling like we were doing that at the time, but we felt like that was the right thing that we needed to be doing.
Right.
So I think we both like charged ourselves to go out and do that in our own ways. And I liked just the broadness of the goal of just being able to say, I'm looking for a place to be able to safely release creativity and, express different parts of myself, and not feel like I'm going to be judged, or it's going to be about views or making money off of this.
I feel like we've sort of been on this exact same journey this year in our own ways that we didn't really plan on, but we've both been having this kind of year of change. And yeah, one of those things was I wanted to create art, but I wanted it to be for myself, which was kind of a very selfish way to look at it. But I'm kind of glad that I've done this. So what I did is I started a sort of semi-private Instagram. It's called Burning Dark Art. If anybody's watching this wants to follow that, please go ahead. It's not privated or anything. I just haven't announced it to my woodworking audience because I kind of just wanted to hold this tight for a while, because I know that, when I announce something like that, there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to follow just because they want to follow me, not because they're really interested in the artwork I do. And I get that, and that's really nice. And I know that they're all doing that with the best of intentions, but unless you really enjoy that artwork and you're, I guess, engage with it in some way, it doesn't really do much good for that platform, I guess Instagram, any of them really, if you just get a bunch of followers but they don't really watch your stuff. I mean, my YouTube is a good example of that, since I haven't been posting videos over there. But I do think that I'm at the point now where, so I've been doing this for almost a year now, where I am ready to kind of open this up, because I do want to start to monetize this art. I want to start to sell prints, and I'll have to get into some of those business goals here in a bit.
Oh, okay. So I see how this is going to work. You set the tone last year with this is what I want to do, and now we can set the tone with this is what the next step is with.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I
I
find
guess
all
so.
of mine were kind of the same way. It's like based off of what I did kind of last year. But it's interesting that you started that off by talking about not like doing something in the dark, or like just kind of being dark about this project, because I think there's something wonderful about the humbling aspect of putting a lot of work into something and not getting those, like, I'm not going to call them pity views, but like those those views that you kind of know you're going to get from the people who just follow you online and are interested in the stuff that you do and whatnot. But when it comes down to it, it's nice to know that, like, I think that's what keeps you hungry. I think that's what keeps you kind of going back to it, because when you do it and you're like, I know this is good what I'm doing, but it's like, man, it's getting 7 views. That really, really sucks.
It's
but I
this
think you have to
mindset.
go through that.
It's this YouTube mindset. Over the past 16 years, I've built up this whole social media validation kind of thing, that no matter what I post online, I have to be primarily concerned about views and who's watching it,
Right.
and how many people are watching it, how many, think about those numbers and the analytics and all of this bullshit, that I've just kind of reached that point early this year where I'm like, fuck this. I don't need that anymore in my life. If I'm going to be trying to make art that's very personal to me, I don't want to be concerned with that. That said, I am at that point now where I'm wanting to monetize this. So I will, I think, be falling back into that in a certain way. But I also think that I have enough passion for what I'm doing to kind of offset that practical, you have to play the game to a certain extent kind of mindset.
Right. And it actually just makes it be about the thing that you're doing and less about all of these other distractions that we find ourselves spending time on. And it's interesting that I say that, because I think one of your goals last year was learning how to schedule your time better.
Yes.
And I don't know if that was you trying to say, I want to find time to schedule this, like it was an extension of your other goals type of thing. But do you think you were successful in that way?
I don't think I was. And I think that in a way, I'm sort of glad that I didn't find some rigid, structured way to schedule my time. And I think it all stems from the fact that I have this like built up YouTube trauma or something from all these years of like, I feel like I have to be producing content for YouTube because that's what I do. That's my job. And, having only made a couple of few videos this year, really, it's still, I have that mindset of, I need to get back to, I have to admit, this is my primary thing. This is my primary thing. But I'm trying to kind of get away from that mindset. And my goal with YouTube is to continue to post to it when I want, whatever I want, even if it's just talking about woodworking topics, or it's just like, I need to make a picture frame. I've made lots of picture frames, but maybe I'll just make one, post it on there, whatever, and put it out there with no guilt, I guess, attached to making my YouTube videos. Just do it at when I want to, because I just feel like I've kind of, I don't know, moved on in a way. But tell me about.
And I know you're saying that authentically, because I know, like, we spent a lot of time saying things that we think we would like ourselves to kind of be, but you're truly there. You're truly there with, and that was a huge thing. You described it as trauma when you were prefacing everything, but like, I get it. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. And it was ripe for you, where you were really struggling with, like, I feel obligated that I need to do something to release on my
YouTube
channel.
is just, I think if you do it long enough, it just fucks with your head. I mean, and I see other people who are at the stage I was in 2016 or whatever, where it was like that. My whole life was consumed with YouTube. And, I just think that I can't, I'm just not interested in that anymore, I guess, is I just had to move on. And I think, though, I kind of think like you might have gone through a similar type of thing. So why don't you tell us about your story this year?
Well, I was listening to my goals last year, and I was exhausted because it felt like I had been doing the same thing for such a long period of time, kind of having all of my creative endeavors be through the same lens. So one of the things that I talked about in the episode was wanting to make more videos, wanting to make more music. I talked about my my love of Eddie Murphy and his ability to kind of be the guy who kind of did all these things. And I didn't necessarily say that that's why I liked him. But now when I look back, I think I was using him as an example, as someone who just does what they want. Regardless of what, decade you're growing up in and whatnot, like he just does what he wants. If he wants to make music, he'll make music. If he wants to make a movie, he'll make a movie. If he wants to move on from something, he just moves on from something. And that kind of ties into what you were talking about. Like even the thought of moving on from something is this like huge challenge that you have to face. So,
I mean, when you've been doing that for so long,
like you said, it becomes part of your identity. How are you supposed to separate your
you introduce yourself to people by saying, I'm Chad Reynolds and I am blah, blah. Yeah. You have your whole spiel, Clean by Space.
I created a YouTube channel and we, through like many years, built up this and that becomes part of who you are. And that becomes what you produce. My license plate is I produce. And I got it during the peak of the YouTube journey, I think like 2017 or something like that, when my whole life was around like, look at this, the end product is this thing, and I'm I'm successful at doing it.
You're wildly successful.
I'm wildly successful at it. Like cleaning videos, who does the whatever, but like one led to the other. So it's like you, where the cleaning part kind of overtakes the video making part, so you don't necessarily feel like the videos that are being produced are truly representative of what you want to be producing at that time. But when that's the only thing you've done, the only reason you're in the position that you're in is because you did this, it feels very intimidating to say, I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try to see if I can literally catch lightning in a bottle twice.
Right.
And then when you even try to do something, early on, you feel like such a failure and an imposter, and you feel like, I should just go back. Okay, I know how to make cleaning videos. I know how to do this thing which sells cleaning products, and I know how this whole system works. I know everything about it. I have my recipe. It's like a baker who knows how to make a dish really, really well, and you can make it over and over and over again. And it's weird when all of a sudden, instead of making it with one ingredient, you're making it with a bunch of other ingredients. But after a while, you do start to see that there's more to it. And that's one of the things that we had talked about. And I think my first resolution last year was wanting to subscribe to the let them theory. At the time, I had listened to a podcast and it was presented in that way. But the concept is basically not worrying about what other people think of you, and you just leading by your own, measure of what you think you should be doing and living, being true to yourself type of thing. And when it comes down to it, you realize whether you're wildly successful at something or not successful at something, if it doesn't speak to you, if you find yourself in a position where your heart is not in it anymore, there's no faking that. Like you're really doing yourself a disservice by not acknowledging that. So it was a whole year, and I don't remember the actual date that it happened. And I went from thinking to not thinking. It was through a whole bunch of small steps. It was through releasing some music and it getting no traction whatsoever, but that wasn't the point. It was about doing some painting. And then it was about coming across some other things organically, which ended up becoming like, this feels when I'm doing this over here, and it's not what I thought it was when I was originally looking for change. I was just looking for change.
You don't even know what those are going to be at the time unless you try those things.
Isn't that the hardest thing to do, to move in with that uncertainty? And at the time, and still to this day, I listen to a lot of self-help kind of stuff, and I like that because it helps reaffirm that like this is the way. The more you kind of like think this way, the more these things kind of happen, and it like reminds me that everything is going well. But when you're initially taking the change, you have none of that. You have nothing under your belt to say, and you feel like such an imposter and all of the rest. So over the course of a year, which was why I guess it was a very good resolution, it molded me to the place where now I look back at the year and be like, I have accomplished that. I'm there. I literally now do something which is my primary focus. It certainly doesn't financially fit those, metrics.
But that's like your real job though now. Even though you're not making money at it, you got to start thinking of that. Yeah. And
I basically over the course of the year stopped having Clean My Space kind of almost in any way be my job or me dedicate work to it, and me pick up little side projects and try little things until I found one particular thing which resonated with me. And it was the content coming out of the idea as opposed to me trying to find things to make videos about, and then that spurring a new interest, if that makes sense.
Right. And so have you completely stepped away from Clean My Space?
Pretty much. I mean, I still have a lot of ownership and like that, and clearly like whatever. But from a work standpoint, yes, I don't actively do that anymore, simply because there was a time where I was trying to bridge those, and I realized that it was like a Band-Aid type of thing where I was like, I need to commit to, and maybe that was during the time that the transformation fully happened, because then my mindset went to like, you need to find something new. And that aligned at the time that this thing that I wouldn't have thought about came along.
Well, now you got to tell us about this. Because you went through several stages of trying different things. And this is what people need to do. If you're feeling in this rut and you feel like you're not getting any place, or you've just been doing something for so long, you just like feel like you need a change, just try something. And that first thing you try may not be the thing. You may try and you think, oh, that didn't work, or I don't like it, or whatever. And you may try a second, a third different thing, until eventually it will lead to the one thing that kind of hits you. So what you're doing right now, I love. Go ahead.
So I did what my resolutions were. I talked about Eddie Murphy, and I'm like, I want to make some music. I want to paint, and I want to make some videos. And the first thing I chose was videos, because at the time it felt like the most direct connection of like, I think I'm still going to be making videos. Let's go to my check.
I kind of know how to do this thing. Yeah.
I kind of know how to do this. So I went over there, and at the time, like I said, I was very interested in the self-help thing or like whatnot. So I'm like, I'll pick a subject and I'll try to like, make some videos about it just to do them. And I did them, and I was happy for them. I ended up unlisting them because it wasn't really about trying to make videos that someday are going to get discovered and make a whole bunch of money. It was about doing them, finishing them, putting them up, and staying dark about it, not sharing with everybody and trying to be whatever. And it was about just completing projects, trying to follow through on what I was saying during the resolutions, which is like, I just want to do it. I don't want to make money off of it. So after that, I moved into a painting stage where I'm like, I'm just going to do a bunch of painting. So I experimented with some interesting paint stuff, and I tried some new mediums, and I started getting into a bunch of stuff as far as the painting was concerned. And then I got into making music, and I think I sometimes shared a little bit of that because I made kids music, and I made kids music because it felt very safe, because I could make silly songs, which I felt were creative. And kind of easy to produce a song without trying to make this brooding love song or like some song about like that has some deeper meaning and trying to whatever. So I'm like, I'll make kids music. And I did. I made a profile on Spotify, and people can go. The artist's name is But Waffleton, and it was inspired by my daughter. My daughter gave me the name But Waffleton because she's very creative, quite like her mom. Literally just on the spot, she can make up really kind of cute names. And I heard that. I'm like, that's a really funny name. And I looked at her and I'm like, I'm going to make, that's the, I'm going to show you a Spotify song and that's going to be the artist name. So I used that as my goal, regardless of how many listens it gets. If I can show my daughter that I released a funny song that I told her about and I can show her on Spotify, I'm like, that's a check mark as far as making music is concerned. So I managed to do that. Plus, during that time, I managed to also make some other music, which I have floating around under different artists and band names and whatnot. So I started doing that. And again, it wasn't about trying to like, oh, now I need to make enough music to like do this. And in the background, one of the things that I was doing was getting back into collecting. I'm a big fan of collecting. And when I was 14 years old, I think it was, I opened my very, very first business as an entrepreneur. It's on my LinkedIn profile, actually, for anybody who goes to people's LinkedIn profiles, I guess. And I opened a sports card store way back in the early 90s when there was a huge boom going on. And I was in high school and balancing out a card shop. I was heavily into sports cards and sports memorabilia and other kind of fun things like comics and coins and whatnot. So I have this big collection that after I stopped doing the store, it was just a thing and I moved on to other things and I stored all of my collection at my mom's house. And then I moved it to the house which I'm in now. And now I'm in a time where I'm trying to like maybe slim some things down in the space. So I was like, hey, I think I'm going to try to sell my collection of sports cards and We live in a time where it's pretty easy to like, I guess, go through and put it all online and try and sell it like that. But I'm like, that's a lot of work.
It is.
And then I was like, if I put it on, whatever, Kijiji or Craigslist or something like that in a big, huge, take it all for X amount of dollars, I'm not going to get anywhere near what it is actually worth.
You have to piece it out. Yeah.
So I was at an antique market one day and I was walking around and I bumped into the owner and I ended up talking to the owner and I randomly asked him for some reason if they had space available. And he just happened to be like, I just opened up 4 new booths. And I'm like, that's really interesting. I think it might be interesting if I were to bring my collection of stuff here, display it, and be able to sell it. And I don't know, I've been getting back into collecting recently. So I think this would be a cool little side hustle, even if it just had like this little antique booth or whatever it is inside this antique market. And it was cheap, a couple $100 a month to actually do. So it's literally cheaper than taking it and moving it into storage and something like that. And then as soon as I started doing it, as soon as I set up everything and I put it all together and I puttered around my store and had people come in and interact with these things. I have toys and board games and I've expanded it so it isn't just kind of cards or whatnot. And I just fell in love with it. All of the people that I would talk to, I just felt so connected to and inspired by. And it's like that whole community. Like when people like, there's no angry people at an antique market. There's no angry people at a sports card store or at a record show or something like that. Like you are happy because you're just surrounded by this. And I realized there's this connection between these collectibles, my childhood. And it's funny because one of the things that I said in our resolution episode last year was, I want to live my dream. And I said, my actual words were, I know that makes me sound like I'm 4, but that's the thing that I funneled. I funneled childhood awesomeness to figure out that's what I want my job to be. And I know it's not painting, and I know it's not music, and I know it's not this. It ended up being collectibles in the most organic way. And then from that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I know how I could make content out of this. And it's fun to make a store. Now I want to open a second store. And as I kind of now get into like searching for interesting things and going to thrift stores and starting to get into like auctions and stuff like that, I'm enamored by this. And I realize that this is exactly where I need to be. This is exactly what I need to be doing for a living. At some point, it'll financially support me in that way. But right now, it can actually be that without even needing to worry about that.
And you've got a couple of different options here because, first of all, I love that you have drawn on all of your years of video making. So you are producing content with this. So, in fact, I think that what you're doing as far as the videos you're making, short form videos for TikTok and Instagram, I assume you are you doing shorts on YouTube also?
I do them all. I've got
You
the
do all
best
that, yeah.
response on TikTok, which is
Yeah, me
hilarious.
too.
People who listen to this podcast and know what we thought about TikTok not too long ago. But indeed, yeah, I know. And Instagram and all the rest.
And what you're doing, though, is so engaging and so entertaining because it's not just like, here's a collectible card that's valued at this amount. And I think a lot of people having no experience making engaging videos would just like see this as like a way of presenting their products or whatever. But you're like researching these things and figuring out amusing stories about the history of these items, and you're telling them in a very funny way. And you don't even have to be a collector or know anything about this world to find these videos interesting, like the history of the California raisins, which I remember
Yes.
those guys. And you have a video on how huge this thing was and how they had so many different toys and products and even a TV show and all these things that I never knew about. And so I think that is really cool that you have the potential of having the content once again becoming an income stream, but it's also fueled by something that you are actually passionate about, which is the collectibles themselves and that whole thing. So and you have the potential of that income stream, which I think is really cool.
I realized it was the same journey with Clean My Space. We did the videos as
That's
a creative outlet, but not the purpose of. And then the videos found the purpose through the people that watched them. And then they could become that without affecting anything because the two things were always separate. And my journey over the past year has been figuring out that it's not the video container that it's in, it's the heart behind the video, like the true organic authentic story behind it that resonates. And I realized when I would be in my store straightening shelves and listening to people walk by an old piece of Fisher Price toy that they remember from their childhood, or the California raisins, or whatever, a baseball card or whatever it may be, I realized that that's the payoff for these videos. Not only maybe, okay, they're funny, maybe it's interesting, maybe you actually do also find out the value of collectibles, and there's that like, oh, buy low, this was kind of discovered at a thrift store and it's worth 500. Like there's still that element, but that isn't the purpose behind it. Like that isn't the one thing that drives it. The one thing that drives it is, to your earlier point, when you follow it, you don't necessarily just need to be a sports card guy or a comic person to enjoy everything, learn a little bit. And I think the short form, listen to us again, Steve. Did you
we were like, remember like a couple of years ago, we were like, man, this short form content,
short form content.
My opinion on it as revised in a way, and not just because, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not that successful with my short form content on there. But here's what I think now. Short form content works if you start and only produce short form content. Like if you could start a YouTube channel that is just shorts, you're probably fine. If you have an established channel of long form content and you try to shoehorn short form content into it, it has kind of a detrimental effect on kind of both types of videos. They just don't go together, especially in this age of like hyper niche kind of content that you need to be producing on YouTube. That would be my current opinion on shorts. And it is funny that I've started posting my videos on TikTok and I get so much more comments and likes, and people do enjoy those seemingly more than on Instagram, which really surprised me to learn that. My Instagram is mostly just people I've invited and friends and that sort of thing. On TikTok, it's just this organic following of people who and my videos that I'm making are just me doing the process. So I'm like putting next to no effort into these things. I'm making like these 30 to 45-second videos, just setting up my phone, shooting me burning these tarot cards, which is kind of where my focus is right now, and just edit it together. It takes no time, add a soundtrack to it, and that's it. So, I guess that's one of those things I may need to improve, but I was hesitant to do that. When I first started posting on Instagram, I thought, I just want to show the art. I don't want to have to show the process. But if you're on these platforms, you got to show the process. You can't just post a picture of your art. Platform, it doesn't fit that platform at all.
And if you want to do what you're doing, or even what I'm doing, you have to have consistency. And that was the other thing that I focused on with the videos. At least my videos, like doing the white background so I can shoot them anywhere, at day or night. Mm-hmm. Like that ends up being really freeing. And to your earlier point of not wanting the video itself to be the primary product that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Primary product is what we're showing. Yeah. And that's the thing. So now this video is like an accessory to it, as opposed to like the core that ends up playing with your head and ends up making you feel like, oh my gosh, what is going to be next? Because I don't know what my next upload is going to be, because the videos are driving, the creativity at that point.
So do you want to talk about some of your goals with this for the new year? Do you have actual concrete goals for the Chad Collects?
Actually, it does fall in line with my resolution. So I'll go through and I'll tell you my first one.
Okay.
It's to be present. Oh man, so cliche. But in my work, with my daughter, with family and friends, with everyone, taking the time. This was yours last year. Actually, I just kind of worded it differently. Taking the time to learn and listen from every interaction and every conversation that you have. The person at the coffee shop, and this again tying back to my time in the store and speaking with people who are like just being in that space and being very present, and not like, after this I got to get that thing done, or after this I got to run off to this, because we all live in this crazy world of like, what's next? And being present is one of the most uncomfortable feelings right now, it seems. So my first one was to be like, to remind myself, because that helps me be a good dad, and to work hard and do all that stuff, so long as in the moment I'm just present. So with all of it, I'm just going to continue to be present. When I feel like this is a time that I should be concentrating more on figuring out the online space. I certainly do want to sell my products online. Right now, I have just stuff with the storefront. I certainly want to utilize online, but it seems like a big obstacle. And as soon as I make it be like, in March, I'm going to start it, I'll be present. It's one of the things that goes on a whiteboard along with all of the other things. And my presentness is going up to it each day and picking the thing which feels right at that day. I want to make some videos these days. And I think one of the reasons why the videos do well is because I'll also go weeks without doing other things and not thinking about the videos, because it's not like videos aren't the thing that is, that I need to just pay attention to. It's part of it. So I find being present allows me to have a lot more time just in general to do things. And I end up getting a lot more done because I stop thinking about what I need to do next while I'm trying to perform the activity that I'm working on. I can more directly answer your question by saying the main kind of goal that I would like to have is to find a way at some point this year to move away from just it being a booth to actually having a standalone store.
Brick and mortar.
I've had the goal of a retail store since I was a little kid. Obviously, it was kind of my first business. And as much as I didn't have a retail store, I had a little space inside another like larger store. My goal has always, I think Kevin Smith, the actor, director, had a lifelong goal of being a comic book store owner, even to the point where I don't think it makes him money, but he literally continues to do it because it's just this labor of love. So my goal is to have not just a shop, but an actual standalone Chad's Collectibles store where you walk in and it's top to bottom, nothing but memories and
That's
cards and
amazing.
comics and coins and toys and everything. So
Did you happen to see that
that's
documentary, side note, about Matt Parker and Trey Stone about Casa Bonita?
didn't they
They
end up buying Casa
So they
Bonita?
did, and they made a documentary out of it because they bought it because the whole place was, being basically foreclosed or something. And so they got it really cheap for like a couple $1 million or something. And they didn't realize the extent of all the infrastructure problems. And it ended up costing them like over $40 million to try to get this place repaired and back up to speed. But it's just an example of these people who are like way outside of what they're normally doing.
Yeah.
It's, they're not making South Park, and they just like, we want to buy a restaurant and we're going to just do this thing. And they're like, this is the biggest, stupidest decision every businessman would tell you.
Yeah.
Pull out of this, get out of this deal right away. But they were like, no, we just want to have this happen. And the thing about this documentary is that it was kind of poignant at the end of it, is that this had been like his dream, because he grew up going to Casa Bonita. I did too. I grew up in Denver and went there all the time, and actually went there since they reopened. But it was like his dream to see this back and remember his childhood with this restaurant and have it come back to its former glory, which he succeeded in. But sort of the bittersweet part is that now that it's open and everything, he feels like he can't really go there, because then people are making it all about him and South Park and everything. He's like, that wasn't the point. The point of this was so people could enjoy this experience of this restaurant. So all this time, all this money he spent on this place that he can't really enjoy at this point. So I don't know. It was kind of a funny thing, but I think it just kind of illustrates it. Sometimes you just have to try those different things, because this is the passion, just like Kevin Smith, like you were saying.
You have to lead with your heart. And I've noticed for a very long time that stores are owned by literally the same 4 companies own every single store now. Every single store has the same music playing in it. They have packages and everything's behind glass and attached with security seals. And there's a security guard standing in the self-help checkout. Like, I tried to bring my daughter to a mall, because I remember going to a mall in the 80s where you could go to the record store, you could go to the food court, you would hang out with your friends, or your family would go to the mall on a Saturday because there was enough diversity in there. It was just the energy. There was a community there. Like, it was that thing. And now you go to this store and it's this sterile experience full of fluorescent lights, and now there's not even employees to help you. Like, it's just a barren wasteland in retail right now. And I believe there's a space to return to, because I've noticed through my re-entry into the collectibles world, there's still comic book stores scattered about, sprinkled about. You look very closely, and like downtown there's a comic book store here, or there's a sports card store. Like, they're still around because they're still beacons of hope, I guess, for people who collect kind of anything, that you can, even if you don't make a whole bunch of money, you can still sustain. You can make it
way different
there.
Going to a place and just looking at all of these items. And I think this is kind of the future of retail. Brick and mortar stores is going to be these kinds of stores, because I think that these larger, huge conglomerates with all of their impersonal service are kind of, people aren't interested in that. Well, I'll go to Amazon if I want that. And so
I think people don't want that either. I think we've gone to the point where it's something.
That kind of authentic experience. I know it's like, it seems, quaint. Oh, I just want the mom and pop retailer. But I think there's more to it than that. I think that there is just this feeling of, we want a physical place to enjoy the way we used to enjoy the mall. And now, the malls are dead, and at least around here, there's nobody goes to them, and all the stores are empty, and it's depressing to even walk into these places. It kind of freaks me out,
because they are all the same store. And if it's a different store with a different name, they're still owned by the same large company that is run by a European conglomerate of financial people who just like do things. We build stores and customer experience long ago went out the window, but especially after COVID, even more so went out. I was talking to a friend about, remember going to like a video game store and they
Mhm.
would have little video game setups with screens and you could go
Mhm.
in and just play a game, or you would go to a record store and they'd have little
Yeah.
listening stations so you could
Yeah.
listen to. Now it's hard enough even just to find an employee to help you answer a question or to whatever, and everybody's worried about employee turnaround and whatnot. What's kind of gone is the concept of going to a store. And
Mhm.
to tie up an earlier thing that I was trying to say with taking my daughter to even a mall, but even like whatever, a shop, a Walmart or something like that, where it's like, we can go to the toy section and we'll go to this section. Like, you don't want to go and just like walk around and see. And I get that she doesn't, because right now everything's just behind glass and behind plastic and da da da. So my thought was to make a store which sells the same type of stuff, toys, games, movies, and DVDs, but they're all secondhand, which is great. I mean, of course, you have some new stuff in the mix to make it
Mhm.
interesting and whatnot, but the thought is also just there's a lot of stuff in the collectible space, which is it's older, but it's a really large store. So not when you just go to the card store and it's just sports cards and maybe a couple of Pokemon cards. You go to this store and you can get records, you can get board games, you can get old toys, you can get dolls, you can get stuffed animals, you can get gifts, you can get whatever. The thought being having little stations set up with televisions and chairs, carpets, and little
Mhm.
setups where you can come and play some of the games before you buy them, or literally play with some of the toys before you buy them. And I get there's this whole thought of like, yes, but you'll have theft and people are going to and I get that. But at the same time, like, Walmart's already factoring in theft into their prices and whatnot. So you can't
Mhm.
tell me that you could take something and have all of the stuff there so you could tactile feel it
Mhm.
before purchasing it. And I think it's a perfect counter to the lack of connection that we have with things in our lives through the Amazon system of just looking on a screen, tapping your size, getting your shoes show up,
Mhm. Mhm.
by someone driving a Honda Civic on your door front, and then you open it and you hold it up and you're like, this is my new shirt. It
Right.
seems to kind of take away the connection. And I realize that collectibles and collectors are the one thing that should probably still have that connection associated with
Yeah.
it. It shouldn't just be this thing that you buy. And right now it seems like that's,
A good
the
example of
majority.
this is I was reading an article about Barnes and Noble, the bookstore, giant, huge chains of bookstores, and how much they're struggling, and their competition isn't like online. Their competition is with local booksellers who are doing it right. And so Barnes and Noble, apparently they have a new CEO who's trying to change things and give like the local branches some autonomy to like decorate the store, make it feel more like a local independent bookstore. I don't know how well that's going to be, because that comes across to me as like corporate trying to look. It's like a
Mm,
big, you know, brewery trying to make something that feels like a craft beer, but it's still Bud.
yeah.
It's still. But I don't know if that's going to work. But we've got some bookstores here in San Francisco that are amazing, and I think that, for instance, there's one called Green Apple. It's been here forever, and I think it's thriving more now than ever. I think people are revisiting these places because there's just nothing to compare with going in and being able to browse in
Yeah.
that way that you can't online. And sure, the cynic would say, well, yeah, but people are just going to go there, look for a book, find one they like, and then just buy it on Amazon cheaper. But I'm kind of thinking, are they? I think most of the people who are shopping at these places want to support those places, and so more than likely they will, or they'll come back. They will buy from that place, or they will come back another time and they'll buy then. But I think that we approach these things with like this default cynical attitude, like you were saying with the collectibles, like, well, you're just making it right. People are going to ruin everything, or they're going to steal things and all of this. And I think that if we start to look at human nature as the default is people are good, that
Yes.
there's going to be those outliers. But I think that we've kind of conditioned ourselves as like a culture that everybody is out to get you in some way.
And I think when you hear people say, I don't know if that classifies as a platitude. I don't know if that's the right word
Hmm.
that I'm using, but when people just say something because it kind of sullies or tarnishes an idea, then
Yes,
then
yes,
then you know that it's actually disruptive and there's
right,
something to it.
right.
In the same way that it's like people just driving their cars around, like what about the regulatory system that the taxis have? We need to stick with taxis, but that's the disruption. And
Yeah.
I truly feel, and I have had nothing but a lot of conversations one-on-one with people who literally feel the same way. There's a
Hmm.
disconnect between it's that entire shopping consumption process, and I
Right,
get how you want to make that be something which is corporate and evil, but
right.
you said earlier it is mom and pops. Like I get it. We're not talking about businesses which are literally owned by mom and pop. The thought is it's like a mom and pop
Hmm.
type business, because my thought is the store that you buy the book from, you'll come back to, especially if they keep, changing the inventory. That's the biggest advantage. Walmart carries the same thing for 3 months at a time.
Hmm.
Every single one's going to have the same GI Joe figures from 2024. My thought is to have a whole bunch of GI Joe figures out and about that you can buy at any time, and there's knowledgeable people around there. There's
Hmm.
other people within the store that are collectors as well. So there's like the community aspect, and when you have a collection which is too big, you can come back to that same store and sell your collection. So it's this. We're also in the world where everybody knows the pricing, right? The technology
Hmm.
has helped us where it's like,
Yeah.
this is only worth this much. So we're not in that collectible stage of like, this is $1,000, please just. So there's already that instilled trust. The only thing that we're now being able to like do better than Walmart is to provide that like, hi Steve, how you doing today? I
Hmm.
know you bought that box of stuff. How did it turn out for you? Oh, you got it. Oh, you got a great hit. We'll buy that off if you, or like that community, which is just gone. There's not even. I used the example of video game stores having it where you could go in and play
Hmm.
video games, and they just took that out because now it's about like, no, get them in, get them out, so we can kind of turn and
And
bring
it
more people.
doesn't compare with online communities at all. And I think this actually leads into some of my uh,
Mm.
uh, goals for kind of personal and relationship social goals. Is one of them was to attend more social events and become part of local communities, because I think that there's just something in me, and there's probably something in a lot of people, that you need that connection to actual humans, and we're not getting this online after how many years of social media now. It just seems like it's getting
Right.
almost more isolating. Like the dream of social media, of social, well, I guess it used to be called social networking. I don't think we really call it that anymore, which was that you would be able to network with all of your friends, and you would be able to, and you could still sort of do that, but that's really not even the point anymore, because it's so different than an in-person connection. So, to go along with that, I wanted to, I these are also kind of vague, but I'm perfectly happy
Mm.
with having vague resolutions, is to just be more vulnerable and honest, especially in these real life situations, to be more outgoing in situations where I feel like I'm holding back, to not be the person who walks in alone into a room of a lot of people, whether that's at a gallery showing or an event. I went to a trivia night, a while back, and all of these things where you walk in and you have to put yourself forward. And so I am trying to do more of that and just be honest, and it works really well when you just approach things with that attitude. And I also wanted to connect with acquaintances on a semi-regular basis, even just to say hi. And that's sort of an online goal too, is just like people that I've made acquaintances with over the years, and even just this past year, and the people we met at VidCon and everything, is to just drop them a line and just say, hey, I was just thinking about you, I just wanted to say hi.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm down with that one. One I didn't write down, but one of the things that I've proactively done over the past year is uh, to initiated that kind of, like, even if it's just sending a text to be like, "Hey, good morning, how you doing?" or whatnot, but just reaching out and trying to engage conversations, asking questions, showing genuine interest in like what people are doing, and then like sending a neat or a message and, hey, how did that thing go, or what's the, because one of mine was be grateful. I realized that like I have so very much, and one of the most difficult things to do is, and it seems like right now is even more of a difficult time to do it, is just to like be happy with what you have.
Number 7 on my list: regularly express gratitude for people in my life.
I mean, I'm going to add, because I think your point about vulnerability really resonated with me, because I believe being vulnerable is the most difficult thing that any human being can do in a social setting. When you open up and you're just like, hi, and genuinely, not in even a self-deprecating way, like open up and be very vulnerable with someone, that's so difficult because we live in this world of masks and whatnot.
But what I found is how receptive people are. It's like people want you to talk to them.
They're itching to talk about it,
like, and everybody's sort of
okay.
Yeah, it's like just to say a little bit about yourself and then make that connection with somebody. One of my goals earlier on the last year's resolution was to talk less about myself and to ask people more about themselves. And I found that works really well. You know, people just like it when you show a genuine interest in what they're doing, a genuine curiosity. And it's something that can't be faked. I think you have to approach that with the actual attitude of like, okay, you found out what this person does. Maybe they play in a band or something. That has right there has opened up a million questions in my mind about this person. And I want to get to know that person about what kind of music do they play and where do they play and how long they've been doing it, all these kind of things.
And putting yourself out there, like you said earlier, finding more social events to do. Part of the reason why I wouldn't want a full-on store is to do a full-on large store. So my concept isn't, like a small sports card store, maybe like a small Target size building with several other collectors or vendors or whatnot. And the whole reason why I ended up knowing that this was the thing that I wanted to do was because I was really embarrassed to tell people that this was the thing that I was thinking of doing, if that makes sense. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like I like, this touched on like that childhood, like this is what I truly love. And if you were to make fun of me for being this person, it would hurt more than anything in the world, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So when you get to a place and you do this thing and you've made money off of this thing, you've become known for doing this thing, you've done this thing for almost, 2 decades. Now you're going back to like, that's what you did when you were 15. That's what I mean by embarrassing. Just this thought is like, you're opening a sports card store like during this iconic, this economy and this retail, culture right now. It doesn't seem to be the right thing to do. And it was really, really embarrassing to be like, this is what I think is what's next. And that's why I'm now acknowledging being grateful for being okay with that, being like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to keep doing it. And I feel good about doing this. So I'm just going to continue doing this. I'm not going to worry about what you think, because one of my other resolutions was literally to be true to myself. And I realized that was the ultimate way of me being true to myself, to be like, go out there and say that this is what you want to do, and then go knock it out of the park. Like, just go and just kill it, immerse yourself in it, and don't sit there and feel like, oh, I need to work extra hard at this. And that was the other thing. Like, I don't want to overwork this.
That's why I've been so hesitant through this whole year of talking about the art that I'm doing, because
Yeah.
it's that's a place of vulnerability, and I don't want people, I especially when I was just still kind of like figuring it all out and just working on these pieces. The last thing I needed was people to be shitty online about what I'm doing, or for people to say, this is, why are you doing this? And so that's why I've been really hesitant. But I think now I'm at that place where, okay, this is going to be an income source at some point. And so I'm going to approach it that way. And now that I have enough experience making these wood burn pieces, I'm cool with that, because I think I've also reconciled it with my YouTube career. And I think that's the biggest part for me that was really hard. And it's probably, if I had to, list the number one struggle that I had this year, it was dealing with my YouTube career. And how do I, how do I get over this sense of like, people expect me to do this. I have to do this.
Yeah.
This is my job. Or like, this is just something that I must do. And I still haven't really gotten over that. I still feel like I have to produce YouTube videos. And I'm not ever saying I'm going to stop doing it, but I have to think about that differently as I move on to this other work that I'm really enjoying. And so, I mean, when I was coming up with my business goals, I had so many just like artistic goals and intentions that I want to work on. And then my YouTube one, I have two.
Okay.
I want to try to post one woodworking video a month. I don't know if that's going to happen. And probably I would like to tell more stories on woodworking, or like just talk about techniques or things related to woodworking that I don't really see other people doing, because I think I'm just, for one, the whole woodworking genre on YouTube is so saturated at this point, and there's so many people basically doing the same thing or making project videos, and the only ones that stand out are the people who are doing the really crazy or huge projects. And we've talked about this before, how you got to put that I spent $20,000 working on this and I sold it for 50. It has to be about, people are very, very curious about the money involved. And so I think, well, if I'm not going to look at analytics and I don't care how many people watch these videos, then maybe I can just talk about what I want to talk about with woodworking and make the occasional project that I need to make anyways. But that was like my only YouTube goals. But as far as the art, I mean, I want to complete my Burning Dark Art website. It's already there. It's not online yet. I want to be able to, I just bought a new camera finally. And so I can take good photographs of these so that I can ideally make prints of these wood burnings. I'm trying to get, one of my goals is I want to burn all 78 of the tarot cards, the entire deck. These are all my own original interpretations of these cards, and then be able to sell the prints, possibly originals online, but also create an actual tarot deck, actual physical deck of cards based on that. I would like to somehow create some sort of a digital product. I don't know what that is yet, but I'm sure that something may happen for that. But the big thing I want to do is I want to apply and get involved in more gallery work and participate in shows. I've got my first piece, which is actually in a gallery right now in San Rafael, and tomorrow night I'm going to a reception for that. I don't know what to expect for that. It's a very small thing, but to me that is like really exciting that I can have one of my pieces on display to the public. And I would like to do that. Selling or setting up like at a craft show doesn't interest me that much, because then it's more, well, what kind of things do people want to buy? They want to buy wood burned butterflies or whatever sells, and I'm not interested in that. And so to me, I'm trying to make this dividing point between the craft and the art, and I really want to focus on the art of what I'm doing and lean in on that. So those are some of the things I hope to do with that. I'd like to join an artistic community. I'd the last thing I put on here, two things: avoid burnout and find joy in the process always.
I like that. I mean, I like all of them, but I really like that.
Because both, I want to like head that off now before this becomes like my YouTube channel, where I had burnout a number of times over the years, and it just got exhausting, and I felt just beaten down by the whole YouTube experience that I was no longer finding joy in the process of making woodworking projects and making videos about them.
Well, you have the understanding now. It's wild to think that back then you didn't even acknowledge that there would be a burnout. I mean, I remember going through that as well, right? Like, burnout, what are you talking about? But now we know that. That's kind of similar to my final two. So I started all of mine with B. I don't know if anybody picked up on that. So be present, be grateful, be true to myself, be creative, which we talked about. Then I had be patient, because I think any good New Year's resolution takes time. That's what I realized. Like it wasn't like for the first 30 days of January, I'm going to work out. And then on January 30th, you're like, I reached my goal. It's more, less
being patient. That's a good one. Being patient.
So just allow things to happen and allow you to continue towards your journey, and being patient reminds you that the rewards don't come right away, and that there's going to be a lot of whatever, and know that that's it. I don't need to tell myself that this is going to be the thing that I'm doing. I need to tell myself to slow down and not have these expectations.
Be present.
Those are to be present and to be patient. And then the last one was to be better, because I felt it was the one thing that I learned more than anything, was the one quick, it's only 2 words, in any situation, in any predicament, whether you're making excuses for your own bad habits to allow yourself to continue drinking or to whatever, to be better in every decision, to be empathetic when you see someone, to be better, to not lean into wanting to yell at someone for taking too long in the line in front of you, and to not get frustrated by this, to be better, to remind myself in this moment, I'm supposed to be being present, and I'm actually supposed to be better. I'm not going to be that person who swears or takes time away from their child to whatever. I'm going to be better in every single, decision that I make. And it's just a reminder. And it's not about like working harder and being better to get more. It's about a reminder to always take a better approach and be, true to like the values that you believe in, and you can only show those by acting them and not just talking them. So
I feel like we can almost bring that full circle to this podcast. Like, I haven't really given a lot of consideration to like, where do we want this podcast to go? Where are we going to, and none of the things on my list had to do with this podcast, but I also think that our podcast went through the same kind of trajectory that our YouTube channels did, where we started out like with all of these, and we weren't being patient. We'd wanted to do everything all at once. We were really interested in the analytics and the numbers and all of that stuff that went along with it, when really all I want to do is just talk to people, interview people. And it was just, I think that having this space just be open for whenever we're wanting to make a podcast is perfectly fine with me.
And I think if people are listening and wondering what's next, I'm glad that we didn't go through and and try to make it be a podcast where it's like, it's just another episode, everyone. I think it's good to know that this podcast will always be here.
And it's changing. It's different.
It's nice to think that it's changing and it'll become something else. We didn't even touch on the amazing accomplishment of our VidCon experience last year.
And the VidCon.
Whether or not amazing. We are, something
we'll do
like
it again.
That. The countless friends that we've built through doing this podcast and
we had a rage.
How much that's
there.
Informed exactly where we are right now is actually because of a lot of the people and a lot of the things that we talked about on this podcast.
Right. Yeah, totally. It's really cool to see all these people that we met at VidCon who are just killing it on YouTube. It's like really crazy to see how good they're doing. I love it.
I remember I remember feeling so connected to each and every person who was at that house. Man, well, we'll maybe have to do a follow-up episode. We didn't even do a wrap-up episode after our VidCon experience, did we?
God, that's right. We didn't. Okay, well, so we'll just come back to another
so
podcast.
We have lots to talk about.
Yeah, because we are the video pros. that was going to be the original. I don't know if we ever mentioned that before. That was kind of going to be our original title for this podcast.
That was Video Pros, where we talk video making.
Because we're pros.
Hey, Steve, what lens are you using on your videos today?
But those are the kind of things where I used to, and I'm trying. That's one of the things actually I'm trying to get away from doing is being like embarrassed or ashamed of like my old videos or things that I was doing 3 years ago even, and just so that was who I was at the time. That's cool. That was cool. That was that person at that time.
I mean, even listening to our episode last year, that was me at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And listening back, I'm like, wow, I've changed so much just in that period of time.
Yeah.
So, So stick around and for those who are listening right now to these very words who have stuck around, thank you so very, 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 very much.
Yeah.
It means the world to us.
We'll always keep coming back to this podcast.
Yeah. No, Chad and Steve still have a podcast.
I have to change the name.
There you go. Thanks for listening, everyone.